Checkity check, mic check, 1 2. Checkity check, check. Checking the mic check, mic check. Hey, welcome to the stream. I'm going to set an alarm to make sure that I don't let my coffee boil over because I got coffee on the stove. So today, I'm going to show you something that I enjoy deeply, and that is using instrument racks. And there's tons of things you can do with instrument racks, and one of the things that I was really sleeping on for a long time was using instrument racks to morph between different effects, not just stacking them up in parallel. That's great. But actually using the chain selector to morph. So I have a little something set up in Ableton to show you what I'm talking about. So let's go. Here in Ableton, I just got a simple loop, just some drums and a bass. I'm gonna group this up and put a sidechain on it real quick so that it's ducking. So this is a really cool trick that you can use to morph between effects, and it's got a really nice kind of smooth sound. And you could do this just by automating the volume of chains. So say I have a couple effects. Let's take like a filter. And do some sort of filter. And then if I group that and duplicate it and then change the filter shape, then I could morph between these two by automating the gain of one of the chains up while I automate the other one of the chains down. But that means I'm using two different channels and all this stuff. But there is a cool workflow cheat. It's not really a cheat, it's a feature of Ableton called chains. And these chains allow you to automate the volume of multiple parameters at once, depending on how you set up these little blue chain markers. So you can drag these out, and then you can see up here at the top, you have this chain selector thingy, and you can map that to a macro, and then you can control the chain selector by a macro. And then you can have different effects, and you can either hard cut between them. So if I play this, let me go grab my coffee real quick. Sorry. Sorry about that. So yeah, so if I'll duplicate this out so we don't have the drums overlapping. So if I modulate the chain selector, I'll turn Ableton up real quick. cool. And then if you use this top little line, you see how it has that top little line, that tiny little blue line? If you hover over the middle of the bar, you move the whole bar. And if you hover over the top, you can see it kind of highlights that white line, and then you can drag it. And that will allow you to start to blend. It's more of a blend than a morph, but gives you a similar effect. So now this volume is going down as this volume is going up, so it's like a blend knob. So that's the basic idea. So I'll show you what I'm doing here in this rack. I have a macro, and then I have, so let me show you what's going on here. So we have an audio effects rack, and I'll close the macros, open up the chains. So here we have two chains. One is a dry, so I'll label that dry and color it for you. And then this is reverb. And the sound without this rack is like this. So pretty simple kind of bass sound made in Pigments, and then with the rack it sounds like this. So here's what I made so far. This is kind of like 3 different reverbs, and I'm using the hybrid convolution reverb. And I chose that reverb because this reverb and most convolution reverbs, they get really glitchy when you try to automate things like the size and the parameters of the reverb. But I wanted to show how you can kind of get a pseudo-automated reverb effect if you just stack a few different reverbs and then you set it up for the chain selector to be able to morph between them. So now I can modulate between these reverbs, and check out how that sounds. So really nice effect. And I'll go through these reverbs. So this reverb, this first reverb, and the second reverb sounds like this. And the third reverb sounds like this. And I'm making them sound a little bit cooler, just putting a frequency shifter before the reverb and then kind of tuning the fine tune up a bit so you get that kind of UFO sound. And then I have a bit crush after the reverb. So that's pretty cool. I'm using this first reverb also as kind of a delay. If you set the pre-delay up and then turn the feedback up, you can get kind of a delay sound. this reverb a bit more different from the others by blending in some of the algorithmic part. We could put them in parallel instead of serial. Doesn't look like this one's working, and I don't know why. So let's try to figure out why that would be. I'm just going to get rid of it and then paste it back in. Oh yeah, it's working. I deleted that. I was on the wrong one, so. That's the one I was messing with. So this will make this difference between them a bit more dramatic, maybe with the frequency shifter after the reverb, and then with this one, let's do some algorithmic stuff too. So it's really a fun way to morph between effects. And you don't have to just put 2, 3, or 4 effects in here. You can put 127 different effects, technically, and morph between them. So really fun way to do this. So maybe I'll start drawing in some automation here with this knob. Do a similar thing with distortions. So I could get a trash out, and we can get a kind of a morphing distortion effect too. So I'll take this trash and I'll turn the last filter on, and I'll just do a post filter. So like I'll turn this on clean high pass, just kind of boost the resonance up, and then high pass it at like 200. And then for the distortion, let's group this, and then I'm going to let the dry signal come through underneath, just like the last rack. And then with this chain, I'll call it dist. And so here's a good thing to understand. So if you're going to use the chain selector to morph between these, but you want the dry signal to happen all the time, you just drag the dry signal out to fill the whole thing. and then you can still morph between other chains so that that dry signal is always going to be the same volume, but you have other chains that you're morphing between. So let's get this first one set up, and then we can duplicate it. Now we have that first chain, we can duplicate it and then change the duplication. So maybe we put the next one right here, and we can create a morph between these two. And then let's map the chain selector to macro 1, and I'll get rid of the other macros. And then move the chain selector to the next one, and let's change this distortion. sounding pretty different from the other one, so let's see what it sounds like blending between them now. So I'm digging that. Let's duplicate this one again. And then we could use a totally different distortion than trash. So let's use the let's use something else. Let's use Ruina by Noise Engineering. So this one doesn't have a filter, so I'm gonna get a Pro Q. Well, actually it does have a filter, but I'm gonna get a Pro Q and just cut the sub, maybe a little low mids, and then let's dial this in now. So remember, we got to move the chain selector to that one so that we know we're on the right one, so we're not messing with the wrong one and thinking that we're messing with the right one. So we'll kind of like get this bigger morph going on here, and then let's do this now. I'll do a rift. We can just get a bit of filter modulation going on with rift. So I'll do like a random smooth and a filter, and let's try low pass phaser. It's one of my faves. So I'll just modulate this cutoff here, and then we can modulate the morph as well. And then I'm just gonna do pre instead of post for the filter, and then let's do some just some soft shaping. So we can put ×2 drive. as soon as we start to automate this, we'll have a super dynamic top bass. And then if you want to control all these at once, you can group all of these. And then if you open up the macro here and the chains, your chain selector, I think, is still... Yeah, so if you do that, you're going to want to have to... If you group all those, it's going to make a new instrument group, but it'll retain your chain shapes. And then you're going to have to map that to macro 1 on this group within a group, and then you can map that to your original thing. And then you're going to want to delete or go right-click and unmap to the old one. So, you know, what this opens up is the fact that you could then duplicate this whole chain and change all those, and then you could morph between the racks that are morphing between the racks. And you could in Ableton 11 and 10, you can group within groups until the cows come home, and you could literally morph between racks that are morphing between racks that are morphing between racks, and have one master knob that's controlling all this insane movement, and it's super easy to automate. So let's automate this a little bit and then see how it sounds. OTT and Pro Q to kind of clean it up. Bring in our reverb rack again, because that was turned off. That is a pretty crazy bass sound. And, you know, I tried to keep it simple. you know? Like, you can get so complex with that type of rack making, and you know, it's not only for basses, it's for drums, it's for everything. It's just a really great way to get movement into your chains without having to do tons of lanes of automation and then try to keep track of them all and keep them all organized. So it's kind of a nice workflow hack. And now I'll show you how you can do it not only with effects racks, but instrument racks, because I've been calling those instrument racks this whole time, and they're not. Those are effects racks. Now we'll open up a couple different synths. So say we have a phase plant, right? And we can take a phase plant and just make a quick sub. So I'm just going to go through sine distortion, back off on the drive. So it's like a squared out sine with a nice third harmonic, and then another group, and actually that's it for now. Maybe envelope. Actually, no. Let's do an LFO, and then I'll get my percussive shape, unipolar mode, one shot. Make this bigger so you can see it. So I'm going to mute that old bass that we had, and let's just focus on this new one. So I think maybe like an 808 style bass. So I'll map that to the volume of the chain here. And then I'll also map that a little bit to the drive of the distortion. So there's a little bit more of that third harmonic when it hits, gives it a bit of more of like a physical characteristic. And then something that's nice to do with these is just to control the overall speed with a single knob. So I'm going to turn this up and then duplicate it, and that way I can use this macro up here to slow down and speed up all my LFOs with one knob. That way I can keep them aligned without having to use sync. So this one I'll use is like a pitch envelope, and we'll just map that to the master tune. I'll go in here and kind of flatten this out more. So now if we group this, we can label that our sub in our instrument rack, and then I could duplicate that and make a noise layer. So if I change this to a noise, and then I make a wave table and modulate the amplitude of this, and then I can turn this down. Maybe instead of a distortion here, we have a filter on the bandpass. Move it up. Bit of stereo. So what we can do now is configure this macro that we're using to control the speed of all the main LFOs on our bass. And we can map those to macro 1. That way we can use a single macro to control the speed of the entire patch. So that's really useful. So we can call this one noise, because I think this is the noise. Yeah, so we'll call this noise. And now we'll get into the fun part. So I'm going to duplicate this sub, and we'll put the mid bass in between the noise and the, or I guess we'll call this top bass. And what we can do is we can actually group this. we have to have 2 of them. So I'm going to duplicate them, select both, and then hit group. And we'll call this top bases. And now within this group, which we can call top base morph, we can open up the chain selector and we can morph between a couple different patches to get even more movement into our base patch. So maybe I'll give a little bit of room here and here, and have this start here, and have this. Oh, see, you don't want to get this backwards. I want this to go all the way there, and then give it a little bit of space like that. Yeah, just I like to have a little bit of wiggle room. So then I can map this to macro 1, and then map this macro to macro 2. And we can call this macro, we can call it top base or top morph. Let's call that top morph. And so we can morph between the bases. And then right here we want to make sure that our speed knobs are macroed. So let's open up the mapping here. Okay, so they're mapped to macro 1, and we just mapped the chain selector to macro 1. So what I'm going to do is actually unmap and map the chain selector to macro 2. And let's open up our macros here. So we have chain selector, and I'll map that to the top morph knob. So our top morph knob works. And then we want to map macro 1, which is controlling the speed of our LFOs inside of phase plant, to the main macro 1 here, which we'll call time. So this is like our overall time knob for all our patches. And if we look at both of these patches and wiggle the time knob, now you can see that macro is moving. So what we can do with our top base here is we can get a rift filter light, which is a free filter. And we can put it here after the group. So if we close this group, we have the filter. So it's the same thing as putting the filter on this top base chain. So we can take the filter and put it on the top base chain, and that way it's outside of this group. So it's going to affect all of the stuff that's inside this group that's being morphed. And then with this filter, we can put it on MIDI. And then here in our instrument rack, we can also put external instrument plugin. And then we can send the MIDI to our channel. We'll call this 808. 808 large. And so we want to send the MIDI to the channel that we're on, which is the 808 large. And then it's defaulted to the Rift filter because right now that's the only plugin we have in the chain that can receive MIDI. Once you get multiple of these in here, you will have another list here that you can choose from. So it's important to label everything so that when you start doing some menu diving, it's really easy to tell what's what. So with this external instrument, I'm going to call it MIDI send, because that's what we're using it for. We're sending MIDI. And let's go back into our top bass here. And with our filter, we can put it on high pass. And then watch this. So if I play different notes, so what we want to do here is we want to just turn the sub off by muting it temporarily. And then with our top bass, we want to just boost the frequency here of the resonance. So there's our fundamental. So we want to cut that away. So now we can, that's basically like a set and forget for now. We can just move on with our lives. But one thing that would be good to do is now macro map to macro 3 the cutoff of this filter That way, if we want to automate it later on, we can. But right now, that is just doing the job of keeping our sub clean. So now we can turn our sub back on. And now there's no sub. And if we want to be even cleaner about it, we can get out a spectrum analyzer. And you can see there's a bit of sub there. It's at like minus 50 dB. So that's not really loud enough to cause any serious phase cancellation problems, but it will maybe cause a bit of mud. So what we can do is so now our sub's gone, more or less. So now if we turn the sub back on, nice relationship there. We might want to go into our top bass and actually cut off even more before we start changing the patches. Now you can see the sub's a bit louder than that third harmonic, and also maybe that third harmonic's a bit too hot, so we could turn down the drive on our sine folding distortion that's causing that third harmonic. So now that's a bit better. It's good for that sub to be the loudest. Okay, so now we're ready to make some top bass. So we could get a couple different types of top basses going on and then morph between them. So let's listen to this first bass. And let's go into the patch. So we can go into this patch and maybe try some FM stuff. Maybe a bit of faster LFO, attenuated on the pitch of the modulation oscillator. So there's kind of our first bass. Maybe we'd use the new convolver. Let's do some of these phaser convolutions. So there's our first top bass. Now let's make the next one. So we can use our morph knob here and go to the next one and then open that up. You want to make sure you click on the right chain and open up the right one. So this maybe we'll do like a Reese bass. So I'm going to turn the speed up smooth up chaos down a bit, and then map this to the tuning by just a smidgen, just like a little tiny bit. Just to make that a little unstable, and then duplicate it. Pitch this one down a bit. Maybe modulate the wavetable position by slightly different amounts. And then maybe we could minimize this, duplicate it again, turn it down on the output, and then we could pitch this or pan this one right and this bottom one left. Maybe tune these down even more. Tune these up. And then turn down the volume automation on them. And then we could boost this one up a bit more. And then we could maybe use the global unison, which is probably kind of slept on. Check this out. 5 versions of the patch now are detuned. On these top ones, we could turn the band limit down, and this will just limit the amount of upper frequencies we'll have in the highs so that those highs are nice and centered. But our mids are nice and wide. And then maybe some filtering. So I'll get another random out and turn it on smoothed, unipolar, duplicate it a few times so that we have multiple randoms to work with. Start with 3. So we could maybe have a couple different filters going, a low pass, and then maybe a band pass. And this one could be like a high pass. Maybe a little disperser after that. And then we can mix in some of that original signal. And then on lane 2, we could distort them. And then maybe we'll do a convolver. Maybe another one of these phases. Maybe something else, cabinets. Ooh. I like that. It's kind of tough sounding. So now we have two different basses, and we can blend between them. This next one's a little louder than the other one, so I'll turn it down. That's pretty sweet. So now we can get a bass line going. Modulate this top morph. Something like that. Take that same reverb rack that we made before, and the EQ and the OTT, and I'll duplicate that onto our new bass so that it sounds a bit more beefy like the other one. I'll do a little bit of MB, a little wave shaper, multi-band action just to bring out a little bit more grit. So I'll do like 3 bands. That's pretty wild. Very crunchy. Maybe too crunchy on this first bass. What sounds so nice is that filtering on the other one at the end of the chain, especially when you have reverb and stuff. If you filter after the reverb, it just has, I think it just has a really kind of a nice tight quality to it. So let's do a little bit of that. So let's do a little womp here. If you want to keep that high end but still have like this wompy auto filter thing, is you can just take another filter and put it in an instrument rack and then just put this on high pass mode and then just keep it up there and even modulate that a bit. To have the high pass and the low pass cutoffs next to each other, you can move these automation lanes around. That way you can see how they kind of line up. So like right here, maybe I'll have like a little high pass spitty thing going on. that is a wrap. That's a wrap for today. I hope you got some interesting ideas on how you can use instrument racks and effects racks to morph between different effects to get cool movement in your patch easily with the twist of a macro. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Comment what you like below. Comment any questions. I'll get to them. Check out my Patreon if you want thousands of samples, a lot of which are from like super expensive hardware that you can't find anywhere else, really. Check out my music on Spotify or wherever you get your music. That's Sephiros 5 EPHRO5. Yeah, the 5s are S's. Sorry about that. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day or night or whatever it is. If you're on another planet or the same planet, whatever. And I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day or night. And yeah, thanks for watching. Peace. And until next time, adios.